In the previous session, we read through the biography of John Keats. John Keats, the poet, is prescribed for the students of BA Part 2, English Literature, Paper 1. We have two of his poems prescribed. One is Ode to Autumn, and the other is When I Have Fears. Today, let us examine the poem When I Have Fears in detail. First, the introduction. When I have fears that I may cease to be is an Elizabethan, meaning Shakespearean sonnet written by John Keats in 1818, although it was not published until 1848, which was 27 years after the poet's death. A lyric poem in the sense that it expresses personal or intimate feelings. The poem centers on a speaker's anxiety about dying before being able to achieve his or her aspirations as a poet. What makes the poem specially tragic and moving is that Keats died of tuberculosis only 3 years after writing it, at the young age of 25. Summary. When I Have Fears is a very personal confession of an emotion that intruded itself into the fabric of Keats's existence from at least 1816 on the fear of an early death. The fact that both his parents were short lived may account for the presence of this disturbing fear. When Keats experiences feelings of fear, one, that he may die before he has written the volumes of poetry that he is convinced he is capable of writing. Two, that he may never write a long metrical romance, fragments of which float through his mind. And three, that he may never again see a certain woman and so never experience the raptures of passionate love. Then he feels that he is alone in the world and that love and fame are worthless. The speaker at times worries about dying before he or she has turned all the thoughts in his or her busy mind into poetry. Before the speaker has filled stacks of books with these thoughts in the same way that a farmer would fill storehouses with harvested grain. At times, the speaker looks up into the starry night sky and sees vast images of elevated, perhaps chivalrous, means brave and bold, love there. The speaker worries about not living long enough to get the chance to translate these symbols into poetry. At times, the speaker fears being unable to look upon his or her beautiful beloved and of no longer being able to enjoy the transformative power of love. When the speaker considers these fears, the speaker feels isolated, as if standing all alone on a vast seashore. In such moments, the speaker feels as if love and fame do not matter, or perhaps are impossible in the face of death. Let us now look at the line by line explanation and analysis of the poem. Lines 1 2. When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain. The opening lines of When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be establish the poem's primary thematic concerns: the fear of death and the cutting short of creative potential. In the first line, the speaker describes moments when he or she fears dying. The line is enjambed, meaning the thought in that line continues into the next line without any pause, spilling over onto the next line and quickly establishing a sense of anxiety, of the thoughts in the speaker's mind surging forward of their own accord, meaning without any control, in other words. The second line is a continuation of the same sentence and reveals that the speaker does not merely fear ceasing to be, but dying before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain. In other words, it is not only a fear of death itself that fills the speaker, but a fear of dying before achieving something creative. In fact, the wording cease to be is significant in that the speaker does not fear death itself, but a lack of life and the possibilities therein. Specifically, the concern over dying before the speaker's pen has gleaned his or her teeming brain implies that the speaker's primary interest is writing. The line features metaphor describing the image of a pen gleaning the speaker's mind. Gleaning can be understood as revealing, showing, also understanding. Such an image likens a pen to a scythe. स्काइथ वो औज़ार होता है जो हम खेत में धान काटने के लिए काम में लेते हैं। हसिया भी कहते हैं हिंदी में। जो एक क्वेश्चन मार्क के शेप का होता है। अ टूल यूज्ड टू harvest crops. The metaphor suggests that the speaker wishes to harvest the crops of his or her teeming brain, or more literally, write down the speaker's many thoughts. Teeming means full, overflowing in a way, and overactive also. The metaphor is specially complex in that the speaker is both the harvester and the thing harvested. Each line also begins with a word related to time, when and before. By placing these words at the start of each line, our attention is drawn to the temporal aspect of the poem and gives rise to a sense of urgency in the speaker's fears. When suggests that the speaker has fears of dying on a regular basis, while before suggests that that particular fear revolves around dying too soon. Lines 3 4. Before high piled books in charactery hold like rich garners the full ripened grain. Lines 3 and 4 expand upon the speaker's discussion of writing or literature and creative potential. The imagery of high piled books in charactery continues to focus the speaker's attention on writing, suggesting that the speaker fears dying before filling books with his or her own words, presumably in the form of poetry. The image also suggests that the speaker feels capable of writing a substantial amount, filling enough books to pile them in high stacks. As in line 2, line 3 also begins with the word before. This type of repetition, called anaphora, draws continued awareness to the role that time, and more specifically its passage, plays in the speaker's anxieties. Additionally, these lines build on the previous farm related language from line 2, creating an extended metaphor that likens writing and the speaker's imagination to the harvesting of grain. Using simile, the speaker imagines books that will hold like rich garners the full ripened grain. In other words, the extended metaphor suggests that the speaker's pen will glean or reap the speaker's imagination. Reap means to cut, much like a farmer reaps grain during harvest time. जब फसल कटने का टाइम होता है वो इमेज यहाँ पे क्रिएट की गई है. The books that the speaker writes will be like granaries or storehouses containing the ripened grain that has been harvested by the speaker's pen. This extended metaphor stresses the speaker's belief that his or her teeming brain is rich and ripened, or is bountiful with poetic material. The language of ripeness, in fact, operates even further to suggest that there will be a right time or season for the speaker to write poetry. This once again demonstrates the speaker's view of time as pivotal to creative achievement and a root cause of the fear of death. In keeping with the speaker's time related anxiety, line 3 is also arguably enjambed once again despite its final comma. The speaker's fear of not fulfilling his or creative potential before dying continues to spill down the stanza in a rush until finally resting briefly with the end stop at line 4. Lines 5 6. When I behold upon the night starred face huge cloudy symbols of a high romance. Like the word before in preceding lines, the anaphora means the repetition in a way of when at the start of line 5 draws the reader's attention to the prevalence of time in the speaker's fears. The repetition of when also implies that the speaker beholds cloudy symbols in the night sky more than once. That is, just as the line when I have fears indicates that the speaker has such fears frequently, when I behold seems to suggest that the speaker also beholds symbols in the night frequently. Beholds can be understood as looks at or sees. दिखाई देता है. This this emphasizes the speaker's faith in his or her creative capacity, as the notion of repeatedly seeing abstract symbols in the sky is a fairly bold one. Line 5 also features a caesura. Caesura means the end of the thought. Although the line is still in iambic pentameter, the use of a comma, you can delete this, children. Sorry. The use of a comma after when I behold generates a pause in the rhythm of the line. This momentary breath draws attention both to the image of the night's starred face, which personifies the night to be like a human face, as well as the speaker's ability to behold the sky. Focusing on such aspects may imply the speaker can behold the night as one might another human face, as if the speaker is capable of bringing the vast cosmos down to a human scale. These lines also blend concrete imagery with abstract ideas, suggesting that the speaker sees symbols of high romance in clouds and stars. These images indicate that the speaker finds a particular inspiration in the natural world, that there are symbols that can be interpreted in the night sky. The meaning of the phrase high romance, however, is unclear. On the one hand, it could mean an elevated or transcendent romance, that is, a love that is more than just human, bodily love. On the other hand, it could more literally refer to medieval romances, legends of chivalric knights, which often took the shape of long, metered narrative poems. In this sense, the speaker would seem to see the symbols of an epic poetic project in the night sky. In either case, though it's clear that the speaker seems to find profound complex ideas in the natural world. Lines 7 8. and think that I may never live to trace their shadows with the magic hand of chance. In these lines, the speaker articulates, means expresses, a fear that he or she may not live long enough to trace the shadows of cloudy symbols in the sky. In other words, the speaker fears being unable to translate the inspiration he or she finds in the natural world into poetry. As opposed to the previous harvest metaphor, the speaker here likens the act of writing to tracing or drawing shadows, establishing a more direct line between the speaker's interest in life and the literal practice of art. Additionally, the explicit enjambment here allows line 7 to rush over into line 8, almost as if the word trace is running after these shadows, trying to keep up and capture them before the speaker's time on earth runs out. The speaker also personifies the huge cloudy symbols of line 6 by claiming that he or she fears being unable to trace their shadows. Symbols, of course, do not actually have shadows, again suggesting that the speaker feels capable of translating abstract concepts, means ideas, into more accessible human terms. Accessible means something that you can reach, something that you can hold, something that is available. However, the idea of tracing shadows could also imply the opposite. Rather than tracing actual symbols themselves, the speaker may only be capable of tracing the shadows they cast, that is, of remaining one step apart from the celestial ideas. The final image of line 8, the magic hand of chance, is a complicated one. On the one hand, the speaker seems to lament being unable to trace the shadows with the magic hand of chance, suggesting that the speaker's hand itself is that magic hand, and that chance, means opportunity and time, would allow the speaker to make poetry. This reading makes the act of poetry seem particularly powerful, capable of magic itself. However, the syntax of the lines also makes it possible to read the magic hand as the hand of chance itself, not of the speaker. In this case, the speaker seems to be contemplating the idea of fate. Whether or not the speaker will be alive, or rather live to trace the sky, in other words, depends on the hand of fate, which is beyond the speaker's control and therefore a source of fear. Lines 9 to 12. And when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love. In these lines, the speaker turns from the abstract concepts of the sky to his or her earthly love for another reason. Line 9 features another caesura, creating a pause between fair and feel. This hesitation draws particular attention to the speaker's emotion, as this is the first time in the poem the speaker definitively describes how he or she actually feels. Furthermore, the alliteration of feel and fair connects the speaker's strong emotion with the physical beauty of his or her beloved. In these lines, notably, the speaker does not discuss writing or poetic ambitions. In fact, the speaker merely fears that he or she may never look upon thee more, that is, never see the face of the beloved again. Whereas other fears in the poem stem from the possibility of dying before achieving certain artistic goals. In the case of love, the speaker seems to view no point as a satisfactory time to die. The speaker purely wants more. This could stem from the fairy power of love, which the speaker seems to view as either a transformative force or something that is imaginary or even illusory, like a fable. Fable is a story. Indeed, the speaker's use of the phrase unreflecting love suggests a lack of reciprocity, that is, his love was not returned by his beloved, as if the love the speaker most desires is enchanting yet impossible. These lines also place a special emphasis on time. The speaker refers to his or her beloved as a fair creature of an hour, immediately drawing a connection between the loved one and time. The wording seems to suggest that love is as short lived as an hour. Indeed, the speaker only wants more. In this case, time itself seems to be the very thing the speaker fears losing. In fact, these lines are truncated formally, literally embodying the sense of time running out. The first 12 lines of the poem are divided into three quatrains. A quatrain means a stanza of 4 lines. मैंने आपको पहले पिछले साल भी बताया था, जिसको हम हिंदी में चौपाई कहते हैं. So 3 quatrains means 4 into 3 means 12. The first centers on the harvest metaphor, that is the first 4 lines, the first quatrain, while the second focuses on the night sky. This third quatrain revolves around love, but the fourth line, that is line 12, is actually cut in half, disrupted by the caesura in the form of a dash. This shortening makes the love quatrain shorter than the preceding two, giving the subject an extra feeling of urgency. Lastly, the meter experiences a drastic shift in line 11, with the first foot flipping from an iamb to a trochee. Never have relish in the fairy power. This dramatic flipping from unstressed stressed to stressed unstressed places a special focus on the word never, which begins the line and is repeated several times throughout the poem. In the falling meter of the word, we feel the falling off from love and life to death. Furthermore, the fairy power seems embodied in the changed meter of this line, as if love has transformed both the poem and the speaker. Lines 11-12. Then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone and think. The dash in the middle of line 12 is the poem's most prominent use of caesura, means pause. As noted previously, the disruptive break in the line serves to shorten the third quatrain on love. However, the rupture also serves as a formal representation of what happens in these lines. That is, the speaker finally resolves the when clauses built up throughout the poem, explaining that when he or she has fears of dying too early, the speaker feels as though on the shore of the whole world, wide world, I stand alone. Just as the speaker feels severed, means cut off or separated from the world and other people, so too does the caesura serve to sever the image of the speaker on the shore from the rest of the poem. This seems to suggest that the speaker's anxieties are specially disconnecting, creating a fissure between the speaker and the world. Fissure means a gap that is epitomized in the fissure within line 12. This sense of detachment is also furthered through the clear enjambment of line 12. The line breaks after shore, causing the line itself to look and feel like a shoreline, an abrupt ending, before which this is nothing but the vast, uncertain sea. This break emphasizes the speaker's sense of estrangement, means breakup or separation, contributing to the feeling that the speaker is separated from the world, just as the shore is separated from the subsequent line and the world that lies across the ocean. Line 13 also relies on alliteration in the phrase wide world. This doubling of W sounds makes the wildness of the world especially noticeable, calling attention to its vastness, thus, the speaker's sense of loneliness. Additionally, the subtle assonance of O sounds in shore, world, and alone evoke an anguished cry or the sound of howling wind, contributing to an image of despair, desolation, and solitude. Furthermore, the speaker uses hyperbole to describe the drastic feeling of his or her fears. That is, the speaker does not literally stand alone on the shore of the wide world. However, the powerful image of a solitary figure on a seashore so big as to encompass the entire world makes the speaker's sense of loneliness feel specially potent. Lines 13-14. And think till love and fame to nothingness do sink. As the speaker imagines being alone on the shore of the world, he or she ponders the reality that love and fame to nothingness do sink. This is the speaker's first direct discussion of fame, and it is notably connected to love. Indeed, by centering the final image of the poem on love and fame, the speaker reveals the ways in which it is not merely romantic love, but love for the speaker's poetry and work that the speaker truly craves. This gives new meaning to the phrase unreflecting love in line 12. In other words, rather than simply lamenting, meaning expressing sorrow over the loss of the ability to love in death, the speaker reveals in the final lines that he or she laments the loss of the ability to be loved, to have love reflected. This complicates the speaker's poetic ambitions, as it suggests not only that the speaker wishes to achieve those ambitions, but that the speaker hopes to be recognized for them, to receive love and fame. However, in the face of death, the speaker ultimately accepts that love and fame to nothingness do sink. This image resists a definitive reading. On the one hand, the speaker seems to realize that love and fame are impossible since death will prevent them, or because, even if attained, they will sink into death like a ship into the sea. However, the speaker may also accept that death is inevitable and that love and fame ultimately are nothing or do not matter. In this case, it seems the speaker may move beyond a fear of death and realize that he or she ought to write regardless of the possibility of achieving love or fame. Indeed, the final line returns to a perfect iambic pentameter, suggesting that the speaker has regained control of his poetic craft and has realized that perfection is possible even in the face of death. After seeing the poem in detail, let us look at the vocabulary. I will not read the meanings. This is a list, you can check it out for yourself later on. Sees, gleaned. The words in bold are taken from the text with their meanings. Teeming, high piled, charactery, garners, high romance, the relish, fairy, etc. Now let us look at the analysis of the poem. In When I Have Fears, Keats turns to the Shakespearean sonnet with its A B C D C D E F G G rhyme scheme and its division into three quatrains and a concluding couplet. अगर बच्चों आपको याद हो लास्ट ईयर हमने शेक्सपियर के दो सोनेट्स पढ़े थे, उनका यही फॉर्म था, तीन क्वार्ट्रेन्स यानी कि तीन स्टैंजर्स और 4 लाइन्स ईच एंड लास्ट में अ क्लोजिंग कपलेट यानी कि 2 लाइनों का एक कपलेट, दोहा जिसको हम हिंदी में कहते हैं. इट वॉज रिटन आफ्टर कीट्स मेड अ क्लोज स्टडी ऑफ शेक्सपियर्स सॉन्ग्स एंड सॉनेट्स, and in its development, it imitates closely one of Shakespeare's own sonnet patterns. The three quatrains are subordinate clauses dependent on the word when. The concluding couplet is introduced by the word then. The sonnet, like On First Looking into Chapman's Homer, is constructed with care. Like Chapman's Homer, it is concerned with the subject of poetry, to which Keats adds another favorite theme, that of love. The sonnet is distinguished by Keats's characteristic melodiousness and by his very distinctive style, which is marked by the presence of archaic words borrowed from the Elizabethan poets. The first line, When I have fears that I may cease to be, appeals at once to the ear and is a compelling invitation to the reader to go on with the poem. Before high piled books in charactery hold like rich garners the full ripened grain, contains two words, charactery and garners, that are quite remote from the kind of language recommended by Wordsworth in his famous preface to the second edition of Lyrical Ballads, and quite remote from the language used by Keats in conversation with his friends. When I Have Fears is a personal confession of an emotion that intruded itself into the fabric of Keats's existence from at least 1816 on, and that is the fear of an early death. The fact that both his parents were short lived may account for the presence of this disturbing fear. In the poem, the existence of this fear annihilates, means wipes out or removes, both the poet's fame, which Keats ardently longed for, and the love that is so important in his poetry and in his life. As it happened, Keats was cheated by death of enjoying the fame that his poetry eventually gained for him and of marrying Fanny Brown, the woman he loved so passionately. This fact gives the poem a pathos that helps to single it out from among the more 60 sonnets Keats wrote. The fair creature of an hour that Keats addresses in the poem was probably a beautiful woman Keats had seen in Vauxhall Gardens, an amusement park in 1814. Keats makes her into an archetype of feminine loveliness, an embodiment of Venus, and she remained in his memory for several years. In 1818, he addressed to her the sonnet To a Lady Seen for a Few Moments at Vauxhall. When I Have Fears was written in the same year. One of his earliest poems, Fill for Me a Brimming Bowl, written in 1814, also concerns this lovely lady. In the poem, he promises that even so forever shall she be the halo of my memory. We will take a break here and continue with with other aspects of the analysis of the poem in the next session. Thank you.